Here's what getting out of the military looks like. You're on terminal leave. You're getting ready for your first taste of freedom after what's essentially the last vestige of indentured servitude in the civilized world. You're running around going to medical and PSD to wrap up a bunch of shit that seems kind of semi-important. But the yeoman, who's the only person in the world who can sign your checkoff list, is on a 2.5-hour lunch. Then they send you to a TAPS class. I remember when I went to TAPS, they hand you this book, From Navy Blue to Corporate Gray, as if the only thing that you can do after a career of shooting bad guys in the face is put on a suit and fill out goddamn TPS reports. Well, I always thought there had to be more. That if you could take a 20-year-old kid, throw him into combat in some far-flung place in the world, ask him to conduct diplomacy operations with village elders while dodging VBIEDs, and also, by the way, stealing truck parts from the supply depot in order to keep his Humvee running, that kid could probably do anything in the world. That's why I built this podcast, Tactical Wealth, because it's not just an idea that the same drive, the initiative, the ingenuity that lets you survive and thrive in military service can also catapult you in the civilian world. Thousands have done it, built wildly successful civilian careers, and I wanted to capture some of that magic. We're officially wrapping up season 1, and it's been an incredible ride. Over the past couple of months, I've had the privilege of sitting down with 8 extraordinary veterans, founders, operators, innovators, each on their own unique path beyond the military. They opened up about transition, money, business, healing, and growth. They showed us that the mission doesn't end when your service does. It just evolves. Whether you're already out or starting to think about what's next, this episode is here to remind you that your best years of service and success can still be ahead of you. For too long, those that have worn the cloth of the country, that have fought and sacrificed for our nation, have been left out of the greatest financial engine the world has ever seen. My service paved the way for my success, and that's true for so many veterpreneurs. In fact, some of the greatest companies were created by veterans. I'm your host, Kaj Larsen, and in each episode, we'll bring you the stories and the wisdom of those who have gone from boots on the ground to successful careers, from military to wealth, and how they've done it, so you can apply those insights to your own mission and life. Welcome to Tactical Wealth, from military to money. Getting out of the military is a big shift. I've been there. You go from having structure, mission, team, to suddenly having to figure out what's next, where your next paycheck comes from. And for a lot of people, that transition is hard. But here's the truth. You have options, more than you think. Whether you want to build a business, invest smartly, or just get your financial house in order, you're not alone, and there are resources out there. But the first step is being informed. Financial literacy isn't optional. It's a weapon. Information isn't the new M4. It's the AC-130 gunship of weapons, the most firepower you can have, the most firepower you can bring to a problem set. And the sooner you learn how to use it, the better equipped you'll be to build the life that you want after your service. You can integrate into the community, you can be of service in new ways, and most importantly, you can build wealth without losing your sense of mission. Now, if you're sitting there wondering, yeah, but is this possible? How do I do it? Let me remind you that some of the most iconic business leaders in America started exactly where you are now, in uniform. Let's talk about a few of them. Sam Walton, founder of Walmart. Before building one of the largest retail chains in the world, Sam Walton was a captain in the U.S. Army Intelligence Corps during World War II. He learned logistics, structure, leadership, things that helped him launch a single Ben Franklin variety store. From there, he reimagined retail, focused on low prices, and eventually grew Walmart into a global empire. His discipline, his service mindset, they didn't disappear after the military. He applied it to business. Phil Knight, co-founder of Nike. Phil Knight served as an officer in the U.S. Army and was later stationed with the Army Reserve. After his service, took a trip around the world where he came up with the idea of importing high-quality running shoes from Japan. That idea turned into Nike. And what he started in the trunk of his car became a multi-billion-dollar brand that reshaped sports, culture, and of course, business. How about Bob Parsons, founder of GoDaddy? Bob served in the Marine Corps and he fought in Vietnam, where he was wounded and earned a Purple Heart. He grew up poor, he barely passed high school, and even flunked out of college at first. After the military, he got his degree, he taught himself how to code, he eventually sold his first company for millions, and he used that momentum to start GoDaddy, the internet domain giant. Today, he's a major philanthropist, and he uses his wealth to support other veterans and communities. John Paul DeJoria, co-founder of Paul Mitchell and Patron Tequila. Now, this is a name that sometimes people overlook, but JP served in the U.S. Navy. He started off as a janitor and a door-to-door shampoo salesman. Eventually, he scrapes together $700 and he co-founded John Paul Mitchell Systems. Later, he launched Patron Tequila, which many of you probably know pretty well. That's wild, is how much of his success was built on grit and creativity, not on privilege. These aren't just business leaders, they're veterans. They've been where you've been. They've worn the uniform. They've carried the weight. They've faced adversity. And then what'd they do? They built companies. They showed us what's possible when you channel the military mindset into entrepreneurship, discipline, execution, resilience. And you don't have to build Walmart or Nike, but let these stories serve as proof positive, as examples that it's possible to build something meaningful after your service. And look, we don't even have to go to the Fortune 500 to find some incredible examples. We had 3 of them right here on Tactical Wealth this season. At 17, Brendan Barrowman enlists in the U.S. Army as a 19 Delta Cav Scout. In 2011, he deploys to Afghanistan with the 4-4 Cavalry and Task Force Spartan. During that deployment, he sustained some pretty serious injuries in combat, which began a 3-year recovery and ultimately a medical retirement. But Brendan didn't let that be the end of his story. Fueled by his own experience with trauma, he became a thought leader in neurotechnology and healing. He co-founded Reboot Centers in Utah, which is a treatment facility focused on neurovascular health for behavioral recovery. Then he launches Neurova Labs, where he developed Nova, an AI-powered VR platform to treat brain trauma and PTSD. He's combined science, innovation, and empathy to help veterans and civilians heal. And he's built partnerships with the Department of Defense and global mental health institutions. He's not just building a company, he's building a legacy of healing. So you got 4 years of service, you're transitioning out of the Army, you have a traumatic brain injury, and you got a GED.
Yeah.
What happens next?
Life fell apart. I got divorced, couldn't get a job at McDonald's. I wasn't a soldier anymore. I didn't know where I rated in life. And I kept losing friends to suicide. And so I decided, the military said I would never not have seizures, never be able to be combat deployed. I was going to go do that. So I worked real hard and got back to a state where I've had seizures since 2013. Got my mind right, got my body right, and then I went back to contracting as kind of the path back to combat. But I kept losing friends and just decided there was a weakness in the medical system that needed to be looked at, and that's where I put my attention, was identifying a physical injury, a PTSD that no one wanted to see. And that evolved into a wild journey of working with other veteran entrepreneurs and side projects, and hey, I'm doing this thing, do you want to come help me on it? And just trying to hustle and steal to build a self-fund and build a company over 10 years, and all of the crazy side paths you kind of go down when you do that. I mean, you know, as building your own business, it's wild out here. It's the network you know and the work you do that take you where you're going.
And you went to school also along the way?
School research mainly. So I mainly got my degree doing research and a thesis.
And how did you do that?
I had a question and went and answered it. So I wanted to know the physical injury. We identified the blood flow injury in the brain that TBI and PTSD leave from a neurovascular coupling standpoint. The decoupling injury that we identified, I helped create the protocol to restore it. We put together our findings, and I published and got a call, and they said, hey, do you want to come defend this in front of a panel? I said, yeah. I told my wife, there's no way in hell I'm going to pass. And I'm a high school dropout, and 6 weeks later, we got the call that it went through. I was like, oh, all right. So I got my first PhD in philosophy, and I'm working on an official PhD in neuro right now.
So, I mean, one of the things we do on this show is we model pathways for other veterans as they're transitioning out of service. You're in the military and you're sort of the quintessential example, right? I assume when life fell apart outside of like disability pay, you didn't have $1 million in the bank, right? And so we're trying to show veterans pathways in order to level up in life when they get out. For you, were the most important pillars of that transition?
So first and foremost, everybody always hears discipline. Like you got to have a plan, and a plan's got to have actionable items that you can follow through no matter how you feel, no matter what's going on. And with that discipline has to come with that financial literacy. So I didn't have that in the military. I mean, I had you live in the barracks before you get married, and your paycheck get paid on the first 15th. And I'm going to take that check in half, and I have my drinking money for first weekend, second weekend, third weekend, fourth weekend. Like, that's what I knew. Yeah. That's all I knew. Uniform comes in, I'm going to go buy a new uniform. Like, that's how we lived. And then I got out, and I realized, like, oh, like, how do I pay rent and electric and gas, because they're 3 different bills. I didn't have that in the Army. I was a child when I went to the military, and they paid all of that. I had a place to sleep, I had internet, I had power, I had hot water. Uncle Sam took care of me pretty well. It was a cush deal. You had to learn all that, I think, delayed. And after what we experienced, that was the hardest kind of hurdle initially to even like figure out like if I had the freedom to go be an entrepreneur or discover something, because it's survival state. Most guys get out and you don't have a support network. Military, once you're out and you're off base, that's your last time. They keep going. The rotations keep happening, the trainings keep happening, and that life moves on, and you're kind of frozen in survival state. So I had to learn that piece was pillar one, and then the second pillar really came down to community. Like, we're lucky enough that what you experience, what I experienced in the military, that we can forge a bond pretty quick. But those bonds, and a lot of veterans watching this, if you've done business with veterans, a lot of vets prey on that to get like the quick fix of, let me get in there, take from you as much as I can real fast, move to the next guy and the next guy. I learned like this is a slow, steady ride. I've been at it for a long time, and I would rather wait 2 or 3 years and take things slow for the perfect growth opportunity to happen. And so that patience that comes to like the second pillar of community, the third one would be patience. Like, nothing is going to happen overnight. Someone's going to tell you they got to wait for you to make $1 million in a year building a business. I got to wait for you to spend $4 million this month to try to even make that happen. Like, right. It's not going to happen, buddy.
Brian Ferguson, fellow frogman. Brian Ferguson's foundation in leadership started early. Born into a military family, he later graduated from the U.S. Naval Academy, became a Navy SEAL officer, deployed to Afghanistan and the Middle East. He led innovation units in undersea special operations, and he even served as a presidential appointee in the Department of Defense. Today, he's taken all that experience, and he's the founder of Arena Labs, a human performance company that helps frontline healthcare teams optimize their stress management, their resilience, and their performance using tools inspired by elite military training and cutting-edge science. Their product, Arena Strive, is the first digital performance coach for clinicians. It's already at use in major hospitals, and it's being evaluated by the Air Force for military medical teams. Brian's also a faculty member at Singularity University. He's co-founder of the Liminal Collective, and he's an advisor to organizations focused on innovation, space, and veteran transition. From combat zones to operating rooms, Brian's mission has essentially stayed the same: serve others at the highest level and build systems that unlock human potential. Because I think one of the challenges for people when they get out of the military is like, there's not a huge civilian market for underwater demolition, right? There's nobody like, you can't really put that on your monster.com, like LinkedIn resume, and people are like, oh, I need that guy to blow up a boat for me, right? Yeah. So like, what do you think are like the skills that you actually pick up through military service that are most translatable in the private sector?
I thought a lot of coming in this because a passion of mine, and I'm grateful for what you're doing here, is like how, I've intermittently over the last 9 years done a lot of work with people transitioning out of either special operations or other parts of service. And I struggle, I like, what is the meta lesson? And I think number one, we were talking before the show, I think especially in special operations, people are entrepreneurs at heart, but that doesn't mean you should start a company. And I think most people in the military are hungry to have a high sense of agency and impact, which is usually not going to come when you're a cog in a large organization. So the question is, where do you fit? I think for me, the probably the meta lesson that I take away of those leaders, number one, it's, I mean, very cliche, but it's about people. And then how do you think about for yourself the threads that allow you to feel like you're still serving something bigger in creating? And I think that, again, is like, it's a trite statement, but where I see people struggle is we take for granted when you're in military service, you're always serving. Like, that's the subtext of everything. And I think when you leave and just dive into something in the private sector that's strictly about revenue or profit, it just sucks the soul a little bit. So you have to start with, like, how am I going to pull that thread of service? And then, like, what's the risk calculus I'm willing to take in this next season? And that's totally different for everyone.
Yeah, I think that part, when you at least consider the culture of entrepreneurship, and I think one of the reasons we wanted to have this conversation was to really, like, tease out this idea of, like, okay, you come out of service and you want to build a company, like, who is that appropriate for? Who is it not? If you do decide to do it, what are the things you should be thinking about? So let's talk about that risk calculus and that risk profile. Like, it's different if you serve 20 years, you're used to a regular paycheck. Maybe you have your TSP, but you have, like, a family to support. Yeah. Like, the slope for entrepreneurship is steeper, right?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, to hit that quickly, what I do, some of the work I've done in around this question is, I think at a basic level, someone going into special operations has a pretty high individual risk calculus to say, I'm betting on myself. When if you go 20 years and you come out and you've got 3 kids and you're the sole income earner, it's a lot harder to have that same approach. However, if you shift your risk calculus to 0, I think that's where people end up really yearning for something more. And that's the work to say, where on that spectrum am I going to shift? I will say, I mean, starting a company, I advise most people against that, because it is insanely all-consuming and difficult, as you know. However, what I see now is, like, the people who've come out, and in some way, that I think, Kaj, the thing that I often, the starting place, I mentioned service earlier, but when you're in the military, especially for 20 years, like, it's you sort of forget your time is someone else's at the end of the day. And so it's the reason people squabble over, a per diem trip or dive pay, because it really is like, you don't have any other way to make money. And so that becomes a point of contention. When you get out of the military, your time is now wholly yours. And so I think the way to start is to say, I call it this sort of portfolio lifestyle. When you're getting back up that learning curve to say, where do I want to sit? The more you can control your own time and allocate it carefully to being around new mentors, new people, new challenges, it helps make that clear. Now, I know that's challenging if you've been in for 20 years, but I think there are still more creative ways to do it than to say, I'm going to take a full-time paycheck and give my time again, but now it's going to be a big company where there is not that threat of service. And I think that's where you start to see a real tension for people.
Yeah. I mean, look, I felt this tension myself when I got off active duty. I said, never again will I be in a position where somebody can tell me, like, you have to do this and you have to go there, and you have 0 choice or else they'll throw you in jail, right? And then somebody reminded me, like, well, that's okay, because outside of the military, indentured servitude doesn't really exist. So you're good. You're absolutely good. But I do think this is an important principle. One of the things that you talk about that I think is so profound is this idea that you can be an entrepreneur without starting your own company. Yeah. Explain that to people so they understand.
Yeah, I mean, there's some of these words feel a little corny, but the idea of intrapreneur is one that comes up a lot. And, the question is, if you exist in a large business or some sort of a large infrastructure that's a big set of companies where you have a lot of autonomy and creativity to either focus on leadership or mentorship, that allows people to feel like they're building and creating. The classic definition of entrepreneurship is starting something solely on your own. Now, that might be if you're going to go out and just, a lot of people get out and want to be sort of advisors or coaches. I think that always hits its own limit where you start to realize you're exchanging time for money, and that becomes its own indentured servitude. I went through that. When we first started Arena, we were a services business, like a consultancy. I was on the road all the time. I was in hospitals all the time, and it was grinding me. But the classic, I think the definition people sort of revere is, I'm going to go out, I've got a big idea, I'm going to start a company, I'm going to raise a ton of money. With that comes insane responsibility that, inside the military, even on the hardest day, you always know you've got a huge institution behind you to back you up, whether that's literally in kind of being rescued in a bad situation tactically, or just in, a legal dispute. When you're building something on your own, one of the sort of early hires in our company, Glenn Trachtenberg, uses this great analogy, which she says, when you're an entrepreneur, in some ways you're glamping, right? Or you're in a big company. And glamping is, hey, like you're trying this thing, and if it doesn't work out, I'm going to go back inside the main lodge, and I'm going to, I've got nice toilets and infrastructure inside, warm showers. Building something from scratch is like being in the Alaskan outback.
You're in the hinterland. Yeah.
And if you don't figure it out, it is existential. Like the company goes away, and if you put all your chips on that, that means you're back to square one, and that is a very high risk calculus. So that's where like there's a whole longer conversation there, but I think sometimes it's okay to go out glamping if you've earned it for 20 years in the military and you want to have some of those creature comforts for your family. That's totally reasonable.
Rich Deviney. Rich served over 20 years as a Navy SEAL officer, completing more than a dozen deployments around the world, including to Iraq and Afghanistan. He held leadership roles inside the Navy's most elite SEAL team. But Rich's most powerful contribution came when he was tasked with revamping our SEAL selection and training process. He there realized that the keys to elite performance were not just skill. It was attributes, adaptability, resilience, drive, team ability, the intangibles. He helped launch SEAL's first Mind Gym, where they trained mental performance and stress resilience. This was a revolutionary approach in special operations. Now, after retiring from the military, Rich took that knowledge and he built a company around it. He founded the Attributes Inc., which is a consultancy that helps elite teams, Fortune 500s, pro athletes, unlock peak human performance, not by focusing on what you do, but by focusing on who you are. He's now the best-selling author of 2 books, The Attributes, which lays out 25 internal drivers of optimal performance, and Masters of Uncertainty, a playbook for turning stress and chaos into clarity and action. Rich teaches leaders how to thrive in unpredictable, high-stakes environment. And he's living proof that leadership forged in the SEAL teams can not only survive, but thrive in the civilian world.
Right.
But what did you find to be the most consistent attributes, and I think this ultimately will transition to how people transition in civilian life, what did you find to be the most important attributes in terms of people's success in making it through training? I only know the dumbest one, and you can like disprove me of this myth. Like what I seem to know is that water polo players and wrestlers have a higher percentage of completion of training. Like,
right.
Is that SEAL mythology?
Actually, rowers too, crew.
And rowers.
And rowers, yeah.
Amazing. So that's true, actually. I didn't. That's not SEAL urban mythology.
It's not. Yeah, it's not urban legend. Yeah. So.
And why is that?
Oh, gosh, I mean, how much time do we have here? I mean, so there's a couple things here, but I think one of the let's talk first about attributes, and then we can talk about uncertainty, because I think a lot of it has to do with uncertainty as much as it does with attributes. First of all, when we talk about attributes, the attributes that are required to be a great SEAL or on a SEAL team are going to look different than the attributes required to be a great teacher or surgeon or salesperson. Okay, so the groups, every group, every organization, every team has its unique set. When it comes, however, to making it through SEAL training or even just military service, I think one of the most important attributes for anybody coming out of the military is courage, and that is a distinct attribute. Okay, and the reason is because courage it has nothing to do with what you've done for a living. Okay, courage is literally this ability to step into our fear. When we start to feel that fear arise, our autonomic arousal, our amygdala gets tickled, and we are presented 2 choices. We know those choices. They're fight or flight. Okay, what neuroscience has discovered is whichever we choose is a specific switch in the brain. Okay, so if we choose to flee, that's one switch that gets clicked. If we choose to fight, i.e. step into our fear, a switch, that's another switch, and that's known as the courage switch, okay? And we, by the way, get a dopamine reward when we do that. As soon as we hit that switch, we get a dopamine reward for doing that, okay? Now, all this to say that that fear response, well, first of all, that proves to us neurologically what we've all known philosophically, which is you cannot have courage in the absence of fear. You must have fear present to access that courage switch. That's one. The next thing we have to understand is fear is subjective to the human, okay? It takes different levels to tickle that amygdala. You could have a group of Navy SEALs in a gunfight with Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan who are literally in that moment feeling less fear than the 8-year-old you just asked to step in front of the classroom and introduce themselves, okay? So you can be a generally anxious person, but because every day, all day, you're stepping into your discomfort, you're stepping into your stuff, your courage level is very high, okay? You could be someone who does crazy stuff, okay? I think you've seen the documentary Free Solo about Alex Honnold, yeah. I mean, it's insane. When you watch this guy, he climbs 3,000
petrifying to even watch.
Yeah, I mean, you get sweaty palms watching. No ropes climbing, you know. But they looked at his brain in this documentary. I don't know if you remember, but they recognized that his amygdala doesn't get tickled the same way other people. It takes a while for that to happen, right? Which means he's not necessarily accessing his courage switch as often. Now, again, I'm not saying Alex is not courageous, but I'm saying that we as human beings need to understand that we are very and can be very courageous people. All this to say, our transition, whatever transition we're making from one mountaintop to the next hill, okay, courage is a huge piece of that. And we have to understand as military people that we have already exercised this attribute a lot, and we are good at it. And if I were to have anybody recommend anybody lean on anything, lean on their courage, because that means you are good at stepping into your discomfort. It's going to be uncomfortable. You're going to feel that fear, but we can do it. And that the confidence alone in any military member making a transition should be, you know what, I do courage pretty well. This is what I'm going to do.
Yeah. So let's talk about that transition, how it was personally, going from that military mountaintop to the private sector. There's going to be fear, there's unknown, there's uncertainty.
Yeah.
How did you deal with that? And what was your sort of strategy after an extraordinary career?
So let me just talk about the neurology of uncertainty and dealing with it, which gets into the second book. When our autonomic arousal goes up, our amygdala is tickled, we are feeling uncertain, we're feeling anxious. We have to understand that it's because our brain is constantly trying to make sense of our environment, okay? And in doing so, it's trying to distinguish or determine 3 important factors. Those factors are duration, how long this is going to last, pathway, what's my route, in, out, or through, and then outcome, what's going to be the end state of this. If we are in absence of one or more of those 3 things, we start to feel uncertainty, challenge, and stress. Our amygdala gets tickled, all that stuff starts to happen. Give you an example, okay? Illness. You and I get strep throat, okay? Strep throat is a known disease or a known illness, okay? We know that people get better from strep throat, and there's a known antibiotic for strep throat. So if we get strep throat, we are in absence of only duration, because in other words, we know the pathway, antibiotic, we know the outcome, we're going to get better. You might react to antibiotics a little bit different than I do. It might take me 3 days, it might take you 1 day. So duration is the only unknown there. Our uncertainty, stress, anxiety level is moderate or mild. Now maybe we get the flu, okay? Flu, also known illness. Most people, at least in today's environment, don't die from the flu, okay? But there's no real thing you can take for the flu. There's no medicine for the flu. There's techniques, people say, but there's no real known thing, and we don't know how long typically it takes for someone to get through this. So we're in absence of duration and pathway, but we know the outcome. Our anxiety, our stress, our uncertainty level is moderate. Now say there's a disease that shows up and no one's seen it before. Some people are dying from it. Some people are not dying from it. There's no vaccine. There's no cure right now. And we don't know how long we're going to be in this thing. This might sound very familiar because this was 2020, right? You know? And in that case, we were in absence of duration, pathway, and outcome, the whole thing. So all this to say that the technique that can be used in any environment of uncertainty, challenge, or stress, really anywhere, is what I call moving horizons. All moving horizons is you're looking at your situation, you ask yourself, what do I know, what can I control? You pick something, and you move to that. And in doing so, you've created certainty by creating your own DPO, your own duration, pathway, outcome. So a real simple example that you will resonate with is in BUDS, you spend hundreds of hours running around with those damn boats on your head, okay? And I remember being during Hell Week, it was like 3 a.m. We're on the beach running with these things, and there's sand berm, so you're next to a sand berm, and I'm miserable, and I say to myself, you know what? I'm just going to focus on getting to the end of this sand berm. What I realized later on that I did was I picked a horizon and created my own DPO. Duration, from now to end of sand berm. Pathway, from here to end of sand berm. Outcome, end of sand berm. And in doing so, I created a dopamine. I gave myself dopamine to get to the end of the goal, and then got a dopamine reward at the end that allowed me at the end of that to come back out, ask the question, pick another horizon, and move to that. And so all this to say is, first, every single one of us as human beings has done this before. You can think of times you've done this. It's basically the neurological equivalent of eating the elephant one bite at a time. The other thing is that we can apply this to any aspect of life, but especially in these moments of transition. The most important thing we have to remember when we're transitioning, when we're diving off our mountaintop into the new valley, is that we have to have an objective. We can talk about the overall objective, that new mountaintop, but then we have to chunk our environment. We have to start picking horizons and moving through those horizons. What do I know? What can I control? Do that. Once you do that, what do I know? What can I control? Do that. So I would say the best, most important tool is moving horizons in a transition.
Yeah, outstanding. So you're coming out of the service. It doesn't matter whether you did a 4-year enlistment or whether you did 24 years of service. You have to have a dive plan. You're going to, plan your dive and dive your plan.
Yep.
But no dive plan goes from entering the water to hitting the ship, right? You're going to have waypoints along the line and along the way, and you're going to hit those small, achievable goals, right? That cumulatively will get you over that next horizon. Yeah, fascinating.
And manipulating your neurology, right? You're manipulating your dopamine reward system in a way that allows you to continue to stay motivated and not quit. Anytime we quit anything, it's because we've run out of dopamine. And so as we pick out these horizons, they could be I'm going to take 10 breaths. They could be I'm going to wait to the next meal. They could be I'm going to make this phone call. But those horizons are managed subjectively by the individual. So you're managing that motivation system, our dopamine system, in a way that moves you through effectively and efficiently.
So whether it's building a billion-dollar business like Sam Walton or Bob Parsons, pioneering neurotech like Dr. Brendan Barrowman, rethinking healthcare performance like my friend Brian Ferguson, or reshaping leadership like Rich Davini, the point is, it's possible. Veterans are builders, operators, problem solvers. Whether you're transitioning out right now or 10 years down the line, it's never too late to start. So look, if you're listening to this and you're getting ready to transition out of the military, or you're already out and you're feeling stuck at your current state in life, here's a quick roadmap. 1, get clear on your mission. What fires you up? What problem do you want to solve? 2, get educated. Financial literacy, business basics, funding. There's no shortcuts here. You got to learn the game. 3, build your network. Community is everything. Talk to other vets, talk to entrepreneurs, and ask questions. 4, start small, right-size this. You don't need a massive business on day 1. 5, validate your idea. Take a step. Stay disciplined. You already know how to show up. Apply that same discipline here. And 6, keep serving. Whether it's customers, clients, or your own team, build something that serves something greater than yourself. Your transition isn't the end. It's the beginning of a new mission. At Tactical Wealth, our mission's simple. Help you build wealth with purpose. Whether that's through business, investing, or creating a legacy for your family, we're here for it. Season 1 might be wrapping up, but we're just getting started. We got big things ahead, and I can't wait to share more with you soon. Until then, stay sharp, stay driven, and remember, wealth isn't just about money. It's about freedom, it's about impact, and it's about mission. See you soon. Hey, thanks again for locking in with us today. I hope this episode stimulated the old brain housing unit. Step 1 to becoming richer is becoming smarter, and I hope some of the lessons and ideas from today have sharpened your knife. As always, I hope you're taking notes, but more importantly, that you're taking action. Thanks again to Siebert.Valor and Siebert Financial for the support. And remember, stay tactical, stay driven, and don't forget to bang that subscribe button.
Tactical Wealth is a Gebbia media production, brought to you by Siebert.Valor, a military-focused initiative from Siebert Financial. The Tactical Wealth podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. The views expressed by guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of Siebert Financial. This podcast does not constitute investment advice, an offer to sell, or a solicitation to buy any securities. Past performance is not indicative of future results. Listeners should consult a qualified financial professional before making any investment decisions.